I too had become complacent. My husband is a man of few words. So he never complained about whether or not I was stressed up. He never complains about sex. He never complains about any of those things. But I know. Welcome to Healing Conversations and Unapologetic Transitions. My name is Jonte Gibson Bryan. I am a wife, a mother, a speaker, author, certified life coach, visionary, empowerer, entrepreneur, and so much more. I am honored that you have chosen to join me. I ask that you make yourself at home. Prayerfully, as I expose myself, as I am transparent in these moments, these conversations, my transitionings, how they feel, that you are granted the courage, the confidence, the boldness to enact the same for yourself. So if you watched my previous video, I discussed the separation my husband and I were going through. And now I want to invite you on this journey of reconciliation. Our separation wasn't long, but it was definitely the most serious. However, this is not the first time we've experienced a period like this. Actually, about 4 or 5 years ago, I thought our marriage was over. So much so that I was ready to risk it all. I don't want to just give his secrets away. I would like to share a part of my story as well. So again, we hit one of the hardest periods in our marriage. Now that I think it was probably around that 7-year mark, so about half of the time from here, we were going through a really, really hard period in our marriage. Because often the question for me was, is love enough? And most often I walked away feeling like love was not enough. There wasn't enough romance going on. There wasn't enough validating taking place. There wasn't enough conversation and communication happening. There just wasn't enough of enough. And so I nearly got caught up. At this period of time, it was one of the hardest moments in our life financially. We were really, really going through it. And so the stay-at-home mom, which I've been for most of our marriage, and he has permitted it. More than permitting it, he offered it, he suggested it. That has been his desire in a lot of ways because my husband is old school. I often hear how men tend to prefer that stay-at-home wife type because of control. However, that is not my story. My husband has not used my role as a stay-at-home mom to control me, to belittle me, to make me feel like less than a person. He often reinforces the notion that my job is as hard, if not harder than his, by being a stay-at-home mom. So back to my story though, we were going through a really, really hard time financially and within our marriage, just in general. And so I went and I got a job at a warehouse. During this time, of course, it was a warehouse, so there's a lot of men that work there. And my husband was not giving me a lot of attention at the time. I remember very vividly walking through the warehouse one day and this guy stopping me. And he said these words, "You better than a motherfucker." And that sparked something within me. Now, I don't often use profanity, but I have to be transparent and honest about that experience. It was captivating. It was profound. It moved me. It made me feel desired, something that I was not feeling in my marriage at the time. So that initial compliment moved from the warehouse to on the phone. After getting off work, and he and I had exchanged numbers, sitting on the phone and talking and laughing for maybe 2 or 3 hours. But that stint was very short-lived. It probably lasted for less than a week. After coming through that, I realized, yes, indeed, I was ready to risk it all. But then I had to ask myself, why? There were a number of reasons. 2 things were revealed in that experience to me. One, that insecure girl who was once in me was actually the woman I was at that current period of time. Those comments, those compliments sparked something within me. It reinforced something in me. It made me feel confident. And it intrigued me, and I wanted to know more. I wanted more of them. Another thing that I learned from that experience is that I hadn't gotten over self-sabotage. I say that because, in truth, it was not about him at all. I had gone through this season in my life where I felt like, God, why is my heart so big? Why do people think that they can just walk all over me? I'm not weak. I'm tired, is what I am. And I was determined in that season to force God to take my purpose away. I wanted to position myself in such a way to prove to God that I was not good enough, that I wasn't the girl he called me to be, that the purpose that he established within me, he wasn't right. He didn't actually know me at all. Who was he? My creator. But I walked away from that season with this understanding that God is also a restrainer. Everything in me at that point in time, I wanted to self-sabotage. I wanted to sabotage everything around me because I was tired of being the nice girl. I was tired of not feeling loved and valued and appreciated by my husband and not being desired. I wanted to risk it all. I wanted to go back to Janet of old. I wanted to go back to the version of myself who would give herself away. Not that I really wanted to give myself away, but I really just wanted God to take his purpose away. And the only way I even thought that I could halfway do that was to self-sabotage, to sabotage my purpose. And that's what I was trying to do. Fast forward some time, my husband and I have dealt with this, him talking to other women on the phone situation more times than I would like to acknowledge. It's been a lot of times. And whenever I had the situation with the guy at the warehouse, that was after my husband had already gotten caught talking to women maybe 3 or 4 times, and it would come to light that he was actually talking to someone at that point in time, which I kind of suspected because he started to move different. The way he treated me was different. He was not being disrespectful in the sense of cursing me out or being abusive when it came to being physical. However, I have since let him know that emotionally, by denying me what he knew I desired, he was being abusive towards me. I'd started to suspect things over the course of the last couple of weeks, maybe a few months. On my birthday, he and I had this huge blow up, this huge fight. And I ended up spending my birthday pretty much alone. My children and I ended up having dinner that evening. And I decided that I would go out and serve the community. So I gave out period purses on that day. But again, he was moving differently. So Tuesday morning, around 2 o'clock in the morning, I got up out of the bed to use the restroom. And in my spirit, I heard, grab the phone. So I walked over to his side of the bed, and I did just that. I used my foot. I was being very sneaky. He was asleep. I slid the phone my way. I thought maybe he would wake up, but he didn't. I walked back into the restroom, and I went into his phone. And whenever I opened it, I saw a couple different text messages. One of the first things I noticed is that instead of wifey, as he normally has my name in his phone, he had it as Jonte. And there was a message there that I saw that read, "I love you." I opened the message up. There was nothing else. But me being who I am, I know that you can, in fact, recover deleted messages in an iPhone. And that's exactly what I was able to do. I recovered those messages, and I discovered that he'd been having conversations with this woman. Actually, there were a few different conversations from a few different women. Originally, I felt very numb. I woke him up. I made it known to him that I went into his phone, and we both said some very hurtful things to each other. To make a long story short, he left for work, and I put his stuff out. This wasn't the first time I told him that I wanted a divorce, that we were done, but this time I was the most serious. And I would have to admit, it was actually the most hard and the most relief all at the same time. The hardest step was making the decision to get rid of his things. We had several pictures around our home that were of he and I. I removed those. I got rid of them. They're no longer in our house. Honestly, I don't know where they are at this moment. I imagine they're at the landfill. Also, I packed up his items and I dropped them off. The first day I packed up half, and the second day I packed up the other half. He didn't think I was serious this time, but for some reason, I was very serious. As mentioned in the prior video, I had to take a look at myself. I had to ask myself, how dare you stand up and encourage these women to know their worth when you are not standing steadfast in your own? And so I had to confront that. And also, in watching this video where it was discussed about a man's respect for a woman, and the person said that men don't respect women they aren't afraid of losing. I realized that in nagging him and threatening him, empty threats, mind you, because I never done anything over these 13 years of us being together. I never actually left, and I never put him out. But again, this time was different. So he came and he spent the night, maybe the second night. He slept on the couch. When I woke up and walked downstairs, his key was on the desk in the hall. He accepted that it was over. So being the person that I am, the person who very much still loves him, I called him and I asked him, where are you going to stay? Because I was concerned for a number of reasons. And truth be told, I was angry, but I didn't want my marriage to end. I wanted it to be a wake-up call. But there would be no wake-up without the seriousness being revealed in my actions. My words no longer had the same impact as the first or second time that I threatened him earlier in our marriage. And I know that. He let me know that he spent the night at a hotel. He told me the cost of the hotel. Based on what he told me, it didn't sound like it was the best hotel. Still realized that even if it's a sleazy hotel, what he would be paying was far too much per week. So I suggested that he come stay at the house. Stay here with some rules in place. Stay here with the understanding that we are not together. Stay here and sleep in our daughter's rooms, but stay here. Because truth is, here in North Carolina, I'm all he has. And I realize that. Truthfully, in life, our family is all he really has. But he was taking me for granted. He was taking us for granted. Again, I wouldn't be the woman I am if I'm not honest. And so, insecure Janet rose up again, and I fell prey to a compliment once more. He knows I've explained to him that in his denying me this attention, and honestly, I don't know if it's even insecure Janet. I think his lack of attentiveness made me feel insecure. But within my person, I am not an insecure woman at all. But there's something about being in a marriage, in a serious relationship, where you are fully and completely loyal, and that person denying you the intimacy, the intimacy, denying you the compliments, the affirmation, and then me seeing some of the communication with women who do not deserve what I was seeing they were getting, women who have not fought the good fight with this man, women who have not been with him at his lowest moments. It wasn't fair. And so, yes, he spent a few nights here. And as he was here, God had been dealing with me about a number of things. Areas that I've had to confront. One, I too had become complacent. My husband is a man of few words. So he never complained about whether or not I was stressed up. He never complains about sex. He never complains about any of those things. But I know. I made so many declarations before we got married. I made so many declarations about how uninhibited I would be once I got married. And yet, I got married, free to do exactly what I want with my husband. And yet the inhibitions expose themselves in the worst way. I become lazy. I stopped dressing up for him. I wasn't doing any of those things. God had been dealing with me already. So I had already determined within myself to stop wearing workout clothes all the time, to put some work in, to do the things that I used to do, those things that I did to get him, and not use the excuse that he's not doing it back. Because I'm not sure if you ladies are anything like me, but there was a lot of tick for tat going on. He's not taking the initiative, so why should I take the initiative is what I would ask myself often. He's not taking or making any advances, so why should I make the advances? He's the man in our family, so he should take the spiritual lead role. But I am the person who introduced him to God. In God's timing, he'll take that role. It was not my right or responsibility to justify my inaction by what he was and was not doing. I felt prey. The only time he see me dress up was to go to church. Gone were the days that I put any work into myself because I'd grown comfortable. I'd grown comfortable. So I've had to ask myself, I've had to reflect on some things. How often do we, as both men and women, throw the whole situation, the whole entire relationship away because we fear what people will think if we choose to stay? That's something I've reflected on. Because in my heart of hearts, nothing he has done has been worth me throwing our entire 13 and a half years away. True enough, we've had some very, very, very hard times, but we've had far more good times, far more good days, far more support, far more love, far more laughter, far more. And yet, I had to ask myself why. It's because I cared too much. I'm getting away from that. But yet, I wonder how many of us do that? How many relationships, how many divorces have taken place, not because both the man and the woman agreed, but because either or of them cared so much about what other people would think about their choosing to stay, so they allow shame and embarrassment to dictate their decisions, and they throw the entire relationship away. In secret and in silence, they sit there with regret because in truth, they didn't feel like it was the right decision, but they cared so much about what people would think that they made the decision. How many decisions in life are made that way? When it comes to me exposing myself, the things that I've written over the years, the things that I talk about, the things that I discuss, they're not pride things. They're not things that shine this great light on how wonderful I am. And yet, it's all a part of my story. For a long time, shame imprisoned me. The decisions I made were most often made in and out of shame. They were made because of shame. Even some of the horrible things I did, most of them, if I can be honest, they were the consequence of me feeling shame. I don't know why it is that we think the more we critique someone, the more judgy we are, the more ridicule, the harder we are on them, that'll force them to do better. That's often not the case, at least not in my case. I grew worse. The more guilty I felt, the worse I became. The more guilty I felt, the less I loved myself. That is my reality. And that's the reality of a lot of marriages, a lot of very serious relationships. We throw them away because we don't want to look like the fool. But I ask you, how do we gain wisdom without the experience? How do we learn love without knowing hurt? How do you know joy and happiness without feeling sadness? How can you fully embrace the good days if there have never been any bad days? The woman I am today, I appreciate her so much because I know what it took for me to get here. The fights that it's taken for me to love myself. The years that I spent looking in the mirror, not recognizing the woman looking back at me, not liking her, forget loving her. I didn't like her for a very, very long time. And now I can say with my head held high that I love me some me. Unapologetically. I enjoy my own company. I can't say that's been the case forever. For a great deal of time, I fill my days on the phone. I went from one conversation to another conversation because the silence was painful. So I ask you again, how much have you sabotaged for fear of judgment and persecution and ridicule of some people who really could care less about your successes? They really could care less about your journey. They really could care less about your anointing. God has given me the grace for this journey. He's given me the grace to love this man the way I love him. He's given me the grace to be forgiving. He's given me this grace when it comes to empathy. And so when I see young girls, young women, young men acting out, my heart goes out to them. When I see the addict, I don't just see the addiction. I know the addiction is wrong, but I can't help but wonder, what hurts you? What has happened to you? What are you trying to numb? The Bible reminds us that hope deferred makes the heart sick. I see hopelessness in those moments. Now, I'm having to live with the things that he's done. Because as his wife, I recognize that just like the little girl in me has had to heal, and she is still healing, the little boy in him should be afforded the opportunity to do the same. So we're in the process of reconciling. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know it's going to be beautiful. I'm believing God for it being beautiful.